All right, let's jump right into this explainer and figure out why your brain absolutely hits the panic button the second you finally sit down to relax. If you've ever felt that weird, nagging itch right when you're supposed to be unwinding, hey, you're in good company. Today, we're unpacking the psychology behind productivity guilt, the hidden burden of rest, and the invisible mental architecture that's running the whole show.
We really need to start by calling out a super relatable frustration. Picture this, right? You've had a ridiculously long day. You've cleared the inbox, done the chores, basically solved everyone's problems. And you finally collapse on the couch. You're expecting this massive wave of relief. But what do you actually feel? An immediate, creeping sense of guilt. Suddenly, doing absolutely nothing feels dangerously close to failing.
And you know exactly how this plays out. Literally within 5 minutes of trying to take a breath or turning on a show, your brain just boots up this relentless mental checklist of every single thing you quote unquote should be doing instead. Boom, you're remembering the laundry or that the car needs an oil change or some random email from 3 days ago. Or suddenly you have this intense burning urge to alphabetically organize your spice rack. It's like your mind just outright refuses to let you exist in the moment without an assignment. Now, it's fascinating to look at the disconnect between what we tell ourselves and what's actually happening under the hood. You're probably sitting there thinking, well, I just have a really strong work ethic, or I'm just a driven person. But the psychological reality? It's a whole different story. Your mind is actually stuck in this subconscious loop where your fundamental worth as a human being is tied entirely to being useful. Which brings us to Section 1, the fixer identity. Let's look at tying worth to usefulness. For so many of us, being helpful, or being the fixer, has basically become the core pillar of our identity. You're the one constantly stepping in to do more, right? You're anticipating needs before people even say them out loud. And why? Because fixing things is literally the only way your mind knows how to feel needed. You feel valued solely when you're the reliable one that everyone else depends on. And honestly, that brings us to a pretty harsh internal equation. Because your identity is so tightly woven into being a fixer, doing nothing is incredibly uncomfortable. Your brain literally associates a moment of stillness with being completely unnecessary. If you aren't actively solving a problem or producing some kind of result, your subconscious just registers that as being worthless. It's wild, right? So, where does this actually stem from? Well, often it connects straight back to early learned patterns. If you grew up in an environment where your emotions were kind of ignored, or maybe you were constantly compared to others, your brain likely internalized a deep, painful belief: I'm not that important. And to survive feeling like that, you had to develop a strategy. And that strategy is what we call the overgiver strategy. Basically, you believe you have to constantly earn your place in your relationships and your career by being the person who never, ever stops working. So when you rest, the approval-seeking part of your brain goes into full-blown panic mode. It is terrified that if you aren't providing constant, measurable value, people are just going to realize they don't need you, move on, and replace you altogether. All right, moving on to Section 2, the internal pressure cooker. This is all about unresolved tension. Psychology actually shows us that unfinished tasks and physical mess create this continuous low-level tension in the brain. If you're a fixer, a messy room isn't just a messy room, it's a massive trigger. It creates this intense internal pressure to rush and solve things right now. You develop a total inability to just sit with a problem, even when a situation clearly just requires some time to resolve. Until the fixing is done, that mental pressure is locked in tight, making true relaxation biologically impossible. Which leads to this absolutely fascinating contradiction. Think about it. You might be the kind of person who completely despises following rules placed on you by other people. You probably hate being micromanaged. And yet, you impose incredibly rigid, unbreakable standards on yourself. You are literally your own strictest boss, relentlessly cracking the whip inside your own mind. So the really crucial point here is that you don't necessarily resist the concept of rest. You resist it because it feels unearned. Your internal driver views relaxation as an oversimplification of your adult responsibilities. It completely convinces you that if you stop moving, you are actively failing your own internal operating system. Let's dive into Section 3, work as an emotional shield. This is where we look at protection through productivity. For some folks, work and repetitive tasks like, say, aggressively cleaning the kitchen or finally clearing out your inbox at 10 p.m. act as a major coping mechanism during times of emotional overload. When life feels chaotic or just emotionally heavy, completing a task gives you this highly seductive, much-needed illusion of control and stability. It basically gives your hands something to do so your heart doesn't have to feel. Let's just walk through what actually happens when you try to stop. Step 1, you sit down to rest. Step 2, you instantly lose that protective shield of being busy. And step 3, without that shield, you are suddenly left all alone in a quiet room with your own internal thoughts. You're forced to face and process pain, anxiety, or sadness that you learned a long time ago wasn't safe to express. So, what do? You get right back up and start cleaning again to avoid your own reflection.
But beyond just avoiding pain, there is another really fascinating defense mechanism at play here. Your brain might actually be addicted to potential. You get caught in this deeply draining loop of dreaming big, planning, and just overthinking every single step of your future.
It's such a bizarre trick of the mind. You imagine your future success so vividly that you get a fake dopamine hit of achievement before you've even started the actual work. But because you are living entirely in the potential of who you could be tomorrow, the reality of just being in the present moment today feels, well, boring. It feels like wasted time. Let's wrap things up with Section 4. Permission to just exist, finding rest without the guilt. The absolute first and most important step here is to extend yourself some grace. This productivity guilt, it is not a flaw in your character. Your brain is simply executing a program it learned a long time ago to protect your sense of value and maintain some control in an unpredictable world. But by understanding these invisible patterns, you can finally begin to untangle them. You can actually start granting yourself permission to just exist, exactly as you are, without carrying that crushing weight of guilt. Please, if you take nothing else away, let this sink in. Rest is a necessity, not a reward you have to earn. Stepping off the mental treadmill is a fundamental psychological and biological requirement. It's not some unearned luxury reserved only for people who have perfectly cleared their to-do lists. Because, spoiler alert, the to-do list is never actually finished. I want to leave you with a thought to carry with you today. The next time you finally sit down and that familiar, anxious urge to jump right back off the couch hits you, just pause, take a breath, and ask yourself, what are you protecting yourself from by staying busy right now? Honestly, the answer might just change the way you live your life. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and I truly hope this helps you finally find some real guilt-free rest.